Last summer I got married and I've always had this dream of sewing my own wedding dress. My mom made her own. Also, I saw this as sort of the ultimate sewing challenge, sewing a wedding dress, even though I wasn't imagining a very technical, complex structure of a dress. And this project was also kind of the reason why I started this channel. I wanted to challenge myself on sewing a dress, and I also wanted to share and document the process. I was actually not sure if I would ever post this video, just because the process ended up a lot more chaotic than I imagined it would be. And because of the time constraint, I ended up with less footage of parts of the process than I would have wanted to. I would have liked to show certain parts that I was too stressed out to film in the end. I do really want to share it though, so I thought I would just rewind a bit and take you back to March of 2024 when I started to film this update video. My wedding dress has officially become one of the UFOs of my sewing closet. I used to have a lot of time and now I don't. So I started making my wedding dress last January, I think. And at that point, I did not have a wedding date, let alone a proposal. I'm not engaged. And I have gotten a lot of questions like, aren't you really stressing your boyfriend out doing this project when he hasn't proposed? And I just have to say that I talked to him about this. He's really on board with me doing this project. It doesn't stress him out. At this point, I do have a wedding date and it's this June, which is, it's not a crisis. I mean, it's like 10 weeks away or something. I've done quite a bit since this video and I thought I'd just give you guys a summary and show you guys some of the footage. Here's the pattern that I used as a basis for this dress. So it's quite a simple pattern in many ways, but I like the silhouette, and I didn't want to overcomplicate things in terms of the pattern because I knew I would be working with relatively difficult fabrics. So I made a cotton mock-up and I was mostly quite happy with that. It fit like it should and no real big issues with it. And I also ordered the fabric. So I bought this lace fabric that I wanted to use as an overlay, and I also ordered silk satin and silk chiffon, and yeah, let's just say that this is where the difficult parts really emerged. So I decided to use the silk satin and the silk chiffon for the skirt of the dress, and I wanted to use the silk satin and the lace for the bodice and just the lace for the sleeves. I want to show you guys the sleeves first because they are pretty much done. So compared to the pattern, I just added a placket and a cuff to that relatively basic bishop sleeve. I used the silk satin for the placket, and for the cuff I wanted to utilize the scalloped edge detail of the lace. So I basted it on before finishing off the edges of the cuff, and then I sewed it on to the right side and slip stitched the inside, and this is what they look like. And also making the bodice was relatively problem-free, so I used the silk satin for the lining of the bodice. And as you can see here, I just ironed on some lightweight interfacing before cutting, and I stay stitched every piece just to make sure it didn't move around when cut before sewing darts and then just assembling the bodice. And then I used the silk satin for the outer layer as well, but I used a layer of lace on top. So I just used the silk as a sort of underlining. And this was also relatively simple and problem-free. Now, for the skirt. I had looked at a lot of dresses online and I really liked the idea of quite a high slit one side of the skirt where I'm planning to have a slit, and this is the other part of the front. I won't say it was a bad idea, but it really complicated the process of making the skirt. So I cut most of the parts for the skirt. I wanted one layer of silk satin and one layer of chiffon on top of that. And the first thing I figured out was that the silk satin was too transparent, so I decided to use like 2 layers of silk satin. And then I wanted to use French seams because you will be able to see the inside of the skirt because of the slit, and also I didn't really want to skimp on the technical details on my wedding dress, so I tried to do French seams going into a slit, which just did not really work. It became kind of like bumpy in the transition between the French seam and the slit and all that. It just didn't look good. So I decided to redo that, and I hadn't really thought about how difficult it would be to rip seams, French seams, in this fabric when I'd also done basting glue on the seams as well. So thankfully I'd figured this out in time to sew the chiffon layer. So here I just used the selvage towards the slit to make it easier to sew, and I just double folded in the edge. It's a bit more clunky than I would have liked to. I wish I had a narrower edge here, but it's a lot better than when I tried to do it with a French seam going into the slit. I did use French seams on the rest of the skirt though, and I'm really glad I did because all the seams are really visible from the outside, especially on the chiffon layer. I'm also unsure as to how I will hem the skirt nicely. I've tried to do like a narrow hem on the overlocker. I just didn't like the finish. I just didn't think it looked very nice. I have to double check that I still have enough fabric for the skirt. I don't have a plan B. I'm just really gambling on making this one actually look nice in the end, so fingers crossed and full steam ahead. So let's just take stock of what we have right now. Here's the front of the silk satin layers after having fixed the whole slit situation. So these are now done, and I also have one panel for the back of these 2 layers. So I have 1 out of 4 panels cut. For the chiffon layer, I had both the front and the back layers all finished. And as mentioned, the sleeves are also done, but they need buttons and buttonholes. And I have the bodice. So this is the lining. Kind of feels small. It fit the last time I tried it on. Again, feels a bit snug. Hopefully it'll be fine. I tried to cut all the pieces for the back, but I do not have enough fabric. I did actually consider buying more fabric at this point, so I did check out the store where I bought these materials originally, but they were out of the lace, the silk satin, and the silk chiffon in the color that I had bought, so that ended up not being an option. I think I'm gonna join 2 pieces. Since it's an inner panel, you're not really going to see it that well. You will see it like on the inside, you will see there's an extra seam, but I don't think anyone is gonna study the underside of my skirt that well. I'm gonna do the cutting off camera. It's not very fun to look at. It's just me sweating over a desk and not swearing externally, but internally. Here is the innermost layer, and I'm going to join together 2 of the panels for the back. At least now I have all the pieces for the skirt. You can see how lightweight this fabric is. For all the seams in the silk satin and the silk chiffon layer, I had to use strips of baking paper to stabilize the seam. Otherwise it wrinkled or the fabric was just shoved into the machine. Regardless of the needle I used, regardless of other strategies that I used, that was the only solution I really found that worked. First seam is done. I need to tie off the ends of the threads, remove the paper, trim down the seam allowance, turn it over and sew the other seam to hide this within a pocket, which is a French seam. After this, I'm just gonna get back to you guys when all the panels of the skirt is done and we can start with some assembly. Good morning. Since I'm having issues with the outer layer, I'm redoing it, I think. It is kind of small, but it sort of matches a bit up with a change that I kind of wanted to make anyway. I want some sort of transition from the lace to the skirt, because right now it feels very much disconnected. I want to have the scalloped edge overlapping the skirt, like this. So I've done a bit more than I intentionally meant to do off camera, but I have sewn the 2 outer layers to the outer layer of the bodice. It's not close in the back, so it looks a lot wider than it is going to be. So there is going to be another layer to the skirt, and I hope that is enough, because as you guys can see, you can clearly see the top I'm wearing underneath. The bodice is fitting, I think. Here I'm just sewing the outer layer and the lining together on the neckline of the bodice. I'm just going to turn it out and see what it looks like. So it looks like it's all fitting. I have inserted a zipper, so now I'm gonna try. It fits. That is a relief. I'm going to sew the seam above the slit just to make sure that it sort of lines up. And I need to insert the sleeves, and then I need to hem. And for the hemming, I bought something that I never used before, which is a sort of interfacing tape. But before that, I just needed to sew the lining to the inside of the zipper along the back. I'm ready to put in the sleeves, and I've just sewn a gathering stitch or 2 gathering stitches along the uppermost parts of the sleeve. I was considering doing like a French seam here, but with the gathering and everything, I think it'll be a bit clunky. I've done one sleeve and I'll show you guys what I did. So I just did like this, where I put in the sleeve, I did an extra stitch 5 millimeters outside of the first one, and then just trimmed off the excess fabric. It's not like the best solution, but at the same time, you can't really like see the details of it from the outside. As long as I keep the edge neat at the end, I think it should be fine. So it's sewn in like this. So this is how it looks after inserting the sleeves, and considering all the issues that I had going into this, I was so relieved that it fit at this point. So now I need to hem and just pin it so that it's even. Unsurprisingly, there is quite a height difference in the hem. So I'm just going to mark around the whole dress and then sort of see if I'm able to round that off towards the back. If I'm not, then that is the length, and it's just kind of like slightly off the ground, shoe showing length, and that is fine. And I've done some tests to help me do a narrow hem. It worked well. After leveling the hem, I ironed on this interfacing strip along the leveled edge. And as you can see, some places I had to take off a bit of the length, and other places it was just at the edge, which shows how much the fabric had stretched when hanging. After that, I sewed a narrow seam against the fold that I'd ironed. Then I cut off the excess fabric, folded it in again, and sewing the final seam. Now that the hemming is done, I need to do the buttons and the buttonholes. And I have bought these that you can cover. I would have preferred some that weren't plastic really, but I'm not sure if that even exists. So these were the ones that I found in this size. And I need 6 buttons in total, so I'm gonna have 3 on each sleeve cuff. So I'm just gonna cut these slightly smaller than they are, and then we'll try to cover them up afterwards. So there is one of these recipes in the back for how you're gonna do this. After making these covered buttons, I went on to sew buttonholes on both sides. And at this point the dress was done, so I just packed it up and off we went. And here are some pictures from the day that I wanted to share with you guys. So it was so comfortable. I felt so at ease in this dress. It was a bit wider in the end than I thought it might end up being, but it just gave me a bit more ease when moving around, which I actually really appreciated. And having the skirt not longer than it ended up being made it a lot easier for me to move around, not think about stepping on the dress, which also made it much easier on the day. So I hope you guys enjoyed being part of this process, and if you like this video, consider leaving a like below, and if you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing. That is free and you can always change your mind. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.